The Vorthak research vessel Silverscale hung in the void, like a blade poised to strike, its angular hull reflecting the dull glow of a distant red giant. The ship's silver-purple energy cores pulsed rhythmically, casting eerie violet light across the sterile observation chamber where Gromnak, lead xenobiologist of the Vorthak Science Directorate, stood waiting. His clawed fingers flexed in anticipation, the dark steel plating of his exosuit shifting with the motion. The specimen was late, not that the humans could help it. Their primitive sublight transports were laughably slow compared to Vorthak's slipstream drives, but patience was a luxury Gromnak no longer had. The Scourge was coming, the great devourer of civilizations, and if the Vorthak were to survive, they needed answers. The chamber's scanners flickered as the human shuttle finally docked, its battered hull a patchwork of repairs and scorch marks. Gromnak's mandibles twitched in distaste. Typical human engineering, crude, inefficient, held together by sheer stubbornness. The airlock hissed open, and two figures stepped through. The first was a human female, Colonel Rebecca Carter, according to the mission brief. She moved with the controlled precision of a predator, her dark eyes scanning the room with unsettling intensity. The second, a male Sergeant Evan Dixon, was broader, his posture coiled like a spring. Both wore standard, issue combat fatigues, their weapons conspicuously absent. A gesture of trust or stupidity, Gromnak's secondary eyelids flicked sideways in amusement. "Colonel Carter," he intoned, his voice a deep, modulated rasp. "Welcome to the Silver Scale." Carter's gaze locked onto him, unflinching. "You said this was urgent. No pleasantries, no deference, just blunt efficiency." Gromnak respected that, even if it was barbarically direct. "It is," he admitted, gesturing toward the central holodisplay. A three-dimensional projection of the galaxy flickered to life, vast swaths of it marked in pulsing crimson. The Scourge advances. Entire systems fall silent within days. Our last outpost near the Krellis Belt detected them 3 cycles ago. Now it is gone. Dixon shifted, his jaw tightening. "And you think we can help?" Gromnak exhaled sharply, a sound like grinding metal. "We do not know. That is why you are here." The holodisplay shifted, zooming in on a single planet, Earth. Data streams scrolled alongside it, population density, military strength, historical conflict records. "Your species fascinates us," Gromnak continued. "You wage war with reckless abandon, yet you endure. You lack advanced technology, yet you innovate under pressure. You are physically weak, yet you fight beyond logical limits." His claws tapped the console, pulling up another file, a grainy recording of human soldiers holding a trench against overwhelming odds. "We have studied your kind for decades, and now we require clarification." Carter's expression darkened. "You want to test us." "Not test. Understand." Gromnak leaned forward, his silver-purple optics gleaming. "The Scourge does not negotiate. It does not retreat. It consumes. And yet," he hesitated, an uncharacteristic flicker of uncertainty crossing his features. "There are rumors, whispers from the dead worlds, that the Scourge fears something." Dixon snorted. "Let me guess." U.S. Gromnak didn't laugh. "Perhaps." The chamber fell silent, the hum of the ship's power core, the only sound. Carter's fingers twitched. "A subconscious tell," Gromnak noted. "Humans had so many of them." Finally she spoke. "What do you need from us?" Gromnak activated the final display, a live feed from the front lines. A Vorthak dreadnought, its hull torn open like paper, something black and writhing pouring from the wounds. "Your weakness," he said quietly, "and why it might be the only thing that saves us all." The holographic feed flickered, casting jagged silver, purple light across the war room. The writhing black mass consuming the Vorthak dreadnought pulsed like a living thing, tendrils of void, dark matter peeling back armor plating, as if it were rotted flesh. Gromnak watched Colonel Carter's face, The way her pupils dilated, the minute tightening of her jaw. Fear, yes, but not paralysis, not surrender. Humans were so fascinating in their contradictions. The Vorthak had spent decades dissecting human physiology, running simulations, cataloging their so-called flaws, fragile bones, slow reflexes, a laughable resistance to radiation. And yet, Gromnock's talons flexed against the console. And yet, the Scourge had halted at the edges of human-occupied space. Not retreated, not attacked, hesitated. Your species, Gromnock said, mandibles clicking softly, should not exist. Sergeant Dixon shifted, his armored boots scraping against the deck. Flatter is not really your strong suit, huh? Gromnock ignored him. The data streams above his console rearranged themselves, pulling up decades, old files, medical scans, battlefield footage, the infamous baseline human metrics the Vorthak science conclaves had once mocked. Your muscle density is inferior. Your neural conductivity is sluggish by galactic standards. Even your pain tolerance is mediocre, Carter offered dryly. Inconvenient. Gromnock corrected. Pain exists to warn of damage. Humans ignore it. They override it. The last word came out sharper than intended. He steadied himself, pulling up a new feed, a grainy vid from the First Contact War. A human soldier, half his ribs shattered, dragging himself across a battlefield to manually detonate a mining charge. The explosion had vaporized 3 Vorthak heavy infantry. Gromnock had watched that footage times. He still didn't understand it. Dixon crossed his arms. So what's the point? You dragged us here to list how shitty we are. No. Gromnock's voice dropped to a subsonic rumble. I brought you here because the Scourge doesn't consume your worlds. It avoids them. The hologram changed again, this time showing deep space sensor logs. The Scourge's tendrils recoiling from human colony worlds, like a hand from fire. Carter's breath hitched. Why? Gromnock hesitated. This was the moment, the gamble. Because, he said slowly, the Scourge isn't just an enemy. It's a predator and predators. His optics locked onto hers. They recognize when prey fights back. The ship's power core hummed louder, violet energy arcing through the conduits overhead. Somewhere in the dark between stars, something ancient and hungry stirred. And for the first time in centuries, the Vorthak were afraid of the wrong thing. Section. Fae. The adrenaline anomaly. The observation chamber hummed with the low metallic thrum of Vorthak power cores, a sound like a warship's heartbeat. Gromnock's clawed fingers hovered over the holographic interface, its silver-purple light casting jagged shadows across his armored face. The human soldiers stood before him, their postures tense, their breathing steady. Too steady. That was the first anomaly. Gromnock had spent decades studying predator species. The Vorthak themselves were apex hunters, their biology fine-tuned for war. Fear was a tool, adrenaline a weapon. But humans burned differently. He activated the next projection, a slow-motion capture of Sergeant Dixon during the Battle of Cerberus Ridge. The human had taken a plasma round to the chest, enough to liquefy Vorthak organs. Yet he had kept moving. Not just moving, attacking. Your adrenal response. Gromnock rumbled. Should have killed you. Dixon's jaw twitched. Yeah, well, didn't. The hologram zoomed in, highlighting the biochemical readouts. Human adrenaline didn't just spike. It flooded. A tidal wave of neurotransmitters, overclocking muscles, numbing pain, sharpening reflexes beyond natural limits. And then it lingered. Unlike Vorthak physiology, which purged excess hormones to prevent systemic collapse, human bodies adapted. They rode the surge like a berserker riding a dying star. Colonel Carter watched the data unfold, her expression unreadable. Gromnock had expected skepticism, perhaps even denial. Instead, her silence was calculating. She understood the implications. Predators avoid wounded prey that still bites, she said softly. Gromnok's spines flexed involuntarily. Exactly. The Scourge consumed entire civilizations, yet it skirted human colonies, not out of mercy, out of recognition. The humans had faced extinction before, wars that scorched continents, and each time, they clawed their way back, fiercer than before. The Vorthak had assumed it was luck. They were wrong. Gromnok switched displays again, pulling up a classified Vorthak military report. The footage was grainy, taken from a doomed scout ship near the Scourge's border. A tendril of the entity had brushed against a human outpost, then recoiled as if scalded. The energy signature it left behind wasn't fear, it was caution. Dixon exhaled sharply. So you're saying the Scourge thinks we're, what? Poison? Worse, Gromnok said. It thinks you're competition. The chamber's lights flickered, the ship's power core surging as if in response. Somewhere in the void, the Scourge shifted, its ancient hunger turning toward an unexpected variable. And for the first time in his long warlike life, Gromnok felt something unfamiliar. Section HFY. Bone Density Paradox. The Vorthak medical bay hummed with the low pulsing thrum of silver-purple energy cores, their harsh light casting jagged shadows across the sterile steel walls. Gromnok's claws tapped against the holographic display, pulling up another set of scans, this time, not of the Scourge, but of the human standing before him. Sergeant Evan Dixon shifted his weight, his boot grinding against the deck plating in a way that made Vorthak auditory ridges twitch. The sound was wrong, too heavy, too dense. Like stone scraping metal, Gromnok had studied countless species. He had dissected the brittle calcium structures of the fragile Yathal, marveled at the flexible cartilage of the aquatic Kasari. But human bones were something else entirely. The scans revealed it clearly. A latticework of reinforced hydroxyapatite, interlaced with collagen fibers arranged in a helical pattern that defied efficient biomechanics. The density was absurd. The sheer weight of it should have made movement sluggish, yet Dixon moved with a predator's ease, rolling his shoulders as if the laws of physics were a mild inconvenience. Gromnok zoomed in further. Microfractures, thousands of them, healed and re-healed over decades. Human bones didn't just break, they adapted. A memory surfaced, an old Vorthak war doctrine, centuries out of date. Target the skeletal structure, shatter their framework, and the body collapses. He had seen it work on a dozen species, but the humans. Dixon caught him staring. Problem? Gromnok's secondary eyelids flicked sideways in a nervous tick. Your species falls from great heights. Dixon blinked. Yeah, and the scans didn't lie. Human femurs could withstand impacts that would liquefy a Vorthak's legs. Their spines were reinforced like load, bearing pillars. Their ribs interlocked in a way that suggested evolution had expected blunt force trauma. Gromnok pulled up comparative data. A Vorthak warrior, struck by a kinetic round at standard velocity. Bones shattered, organs pulped. A human hit with the same force, bruised, bleeding, but still standing, still fighting. His claws trembled. This wasn't resilience. This was something darker, something engineered. The ship's calm crackled. Colonel Carter's voice cut through the silence. Dixon, get to the hangar. We've got live. Fire drills in 10. Dixon nodded, turning to leave, then paused. You coming, Doc? Or you gonna keep staring at my x-rays like they bit you? Gromnok didn't answer. His mind was racing, piecing together the implications. Humanity hadn't just survived their wars. They'd weaponized survival itself, and somewhere in the void, the Scourge had sensed it too. Section HFY. The sleep bomb. Gromnok's claws scraped against the polished alloy of the medical console, leaving faint silver streaks in their wake. The human's biometrics still flickered across the screen. Heart rate, neural activity, muscle density, all of it wrong. Not flawed, not inferior. Wrong in the way a blade was wrong when pressed against flesh. It was never meant to cut. He had studied war for cycles, knew the mathematics of destruction. How much force it took to crack a Vorthak carapace. How many joules to overload a shield matrix. But this, humans didn't break. They bent. And when they bent, they coiled. A chime from his terminal pulled him from his thoughts. The data packet was marked with the sigil of High Command, encrypted in the jagged cipher of wartime priority. Gromnok's secondary eyelids flicked sideways in unease. Nothing good came in that shade of violet. He opened it, and the universe tilted. 3 solar rotations earlier, on the edge of the Scourge advance, the Silent Claw, a Vorthak reconnaissance frigate, had been running dark through the debris field of a dead system. Its hull was matte black, its engines cold, its energy signature smothered beneath layers of null field dampeners. Standard protocol when skirting the edges of Scourge territory. Then the scanners screamed. Commander Vorgul's spines flared as the alert painted his tactical display. A single vessel, adrift in the wreckage of a mining outpost human. His first instinct was to burn it from the void, the Scourge hunted by scent, and the last thing the Vorthak needed was another trail leading back to their refugee fleets. But then the Silent Claw's sensors parsed the wreck. No weapons, no shields, just a battered colony transport, its hull breached, its atmosphere bleeding into the vacuum, and inside life signs. 1. Flickering. Present day, aboard the human warship Indomitable. Gromnok's respiratory vents hissed shut. The file contained footage from the Silent Claw's internal logs. Grainy, distorted by emergency power fluctuations, but unmistakable. A human child, maybe 8 standard cycles old, curled in the wreckage of a cryopod, its skin blue with hypoxia, its pulse so weak the scanners barely registered it. And Vorgul, who had glassed 3 worlds for tactical advantage, ordering his medics to stabilize it. The next clip showed the human awake, small, fragile, looking, sitting cross-legged in the Silent Claw's mess hall, wrapped in a thermal blanket, staring at a nutrient paste ration like it was a puzzle. Then it looked up directly into the recorder and smiled. Gromnok's blood went cold because the footage time stamp matched exactly with the first recorded Scourge deviation from known attack patterns. 3 cycles ago, the first time the Hive Mind had ever broken off an assault, the first time they had retreated, and now the Scourge were coming for the Vorthak homeworlds. Not to conquer, Sergeant Dixon's voice crackled over the ship-wide comm. Doc, you seeing this? Hangar bays lit up like a festival. Carter's got some new toy shez itching to test. Gromnok didn't move. On screen, the human child reached out, touched the edge of the recording device with tiny blunt fingers, and whispered a single word in mangled Vorthak. The console under Gromnok's claws cracked. He finally understood. The Scourge weren't hunting the Vorthak. They were running from the humans. The Vorthak research station thrummed with the low, pulsing hum of emergency power. Gromnok's claws hovered over the console, the cracked interface flickering with corrupted data streams. The child's whispered word, safe, echoed in his skull like a malfunctioning neural loop. He had spent cycles studying human physiology, their soft flesh, their fragile bones, their laughable pain tolerance. The Vorthak medical archives were filled with clinical dissections of human weakness, how their nervous systems overloaded at stimuli that would barely register to a Vorthak warrior, how their bodies broke under pressure that his species would shrug off. Yet now, the Scourge, the Galaxy's apex predators, the unstoppable tide of chitin and fang that had devoured entire star systems, were retreating. From them, Gromnok's secondary eyelids flicked shut, a reflexive response to the cognitive dissonance gnawing at his mind. The footage played again, the human child's fingers brushing the recorder, its smile a grotesque mockery of Vorthak logic. A proximity alert blared. The station's external sensors lit up with incoming signatures. Human dropships, sleek and angular, their hulls scorched from atmospheric entry. They moved with a precision that bordered on arrogance, cutting through the debris field of the last Scourge assault, like blades through water. Gromnok's neural interface, fed him the data before he could process it. Biological readings, erratic, adrenaline spikes, cortisol levels off the charts. Humans should have been incapacitated by now. Yet the dropships didn't waver. Colonel Carter's voice cut through the static of the Vorthak comms. Untranslated raw Dixon, move your ass. We're on the clock. Sergeant Dixon's response was a garbled burst of laughter. Gromnock's claws flexed. The humans had no right to sound so alive. Not here, not in the ruins of a battle that should have broken them. The station's medical bay was still littered with their wounded soldiers, who should have been screaming, who should have been begging for the mercy of unconsciousness. Instead, they were laughing. One of them, a female with a shattered femur, her blood staining the sterile floor, was humming. Gromnock's neural receptors fired in dissonant patterns. This wasn't pain tolerance. This was something else, something worse. The first human breached the station's inner sanctum. Colonel Carter's armor was pitted with acid burns. Her visor cracked from a near-missile Scourge projectile. She moved like a predator, her gait uneven but deliberate, her rifle slung low. Gromnock expected demands, threats. Instead, Carter tilted her head, studying the cracked console, the frozen image of the child. "Yeah," she said, voice rough, "that's ours." Gromnock's spines flattened. The human wasn't here to negotiate. She was here to collect. The station shuddered. Somewhere in the depths of the research wing, something detonated, a controlled explosion too precise to be accidental. The humans were carving their way through the Vorthak defenses like surgeons, not soldiers. Dixon's voice crackled again. "Found the lab. You're gonna love this, Doc." Gromnock didn't need to see the feed to know what the human had discovered. The Scourge dissection chambers, the vivisection tables, the experiments. Carter's expression didn't change, but her grip on the rifle tightened. The last thing Gromnock registered before the neural override hit was the human's voice, soft and terrible. "You don't get it yet, do you?" Then the pain came, not the sharp, clean agony of a Vorthak nerve strike, but something deeper, something human. The station's systems screamed as Carter's override codes ripped through them, flooding Gromnock's neural uplink with a feedback loop of raw, unfiltered sensation. Every injury, every wound, every scar ever recorded in the human medical archives, a billion fractures, a billion burns, a billion lives worth of suffering, compressed into a single shattering moment. Gromnock's body locked, his vocal cords seizing as the overload hit. Humans weren't weak. They were built for this, and now, so was he. Gromnock's body convulsed, his neural uplink burning with the echoes of 1,000 human screams. The pain was not his own, yet it carved through him with intimate precision. Each pulse, a fresh wound, each surge of agony a memory stolen from human flesh. His silver-purple plating, once immaculate under the harsh glow of the station's lighting, now trembled as his system struggled to purge the foreign torment. Across the dissection chamber, Colonel Carter watched. She did not smile. That was the first thing Gromnock registered when his vision cleared. The absence of triumph in the human's expression. No sneer, no gloating twist of the lips. Just the steady, unblinking focus of a predator who had already calculated the kill. She laughed. It was a soft sound, almost lost beneath the hum of the station's failing systems. But to Gromnock, it was a detonation. A violation of all known combat protocols. Laughter was for victory, for dominance, not for the quiet space between one strike and the next. Yet there it was. Carter's shoulders shook, just once, as if Shed heard some private joke. Her rifle remained leveled at his cranial node, but her eyes, those flat, pitiless eyes, flickered with something the Vorthak had no translation for. Gromnock's neural processors scrambled for context. Humans were not supposed to laugh in the face of annihilation. They were supposed to beg, to bargain, to break. But this one amused herself. Behind her, Sergeant Dixon exhaled sharply through his nose. Not a laugh, not quite, but something adjacent, something worse. "Damn, Colonel," he muttered, thumbing the safety off his sidearm. "You enjoyed that." Carter didn't deny it. The station shuddered around them, the deck plating groaning as the human override codes tore deeper into its systems. Violet emergency lights strobed, casting jagged shadows across the dissection tables. Tables that had held human subjects. Tables still smeared with fluids the Vorthak had deemed worth studying. Gromnock's spinal struts locked as another wave of stolen pain lanced through him. His own systems, so meticulously engineered for war, had no defense against this. Against them, humans were not like the Vorthak. They did not purge weakness, they weaponized it. And now, as Carter stepped forward, her boot heels clicking against the blood-slicked floor, Gromnock understood. The laughter wasn't defiance. It wasn't madness. It was recognition. She saw the dissection reports, the vivisection logs, the cold clinical notes on human pain thresholds, and she found it funny because the Vorthak had missed the most critical data point of all. Humans didn't just endure agony, they remembered it, and they paid it back. The last thing Gromnock saw before the neural feedback finally overloaded his core processors was Carter's finger curling around the trigger, not in anger, not in vengeance, but with the same terrible quiet amusement of a woman who had just realized the monsters she'd been sent to kill. They'd underestimated her. Section Fae, nutritional horror, the Vorthak research facility was a corpse. Its silver-purple corridors, once humming with the harsh energy signatures of military-grade scanners, now flickered in dying spasms. The air stank of ionized metal and something thicker, something organic. The remnants of a species that had dissected humans like specimens and never once considered they might fight back. Gromnock's body lay where it had fallen, his neural core still sparking, his ocular implants dimming in erratic pulses. The dissection reports were scattered around him, their cold, clinical observations now soaked in his own vital fluids. Subject exhibits abnormal pain tolerance. Muscle fibers demonstrate regenerative properties under stress. Neurological response suggests capacity for long-term memory retention of traumatic stimuli. The Vorthak had documented everything and understood nothing, because they had missed the most fundamental truth of all. Humans ate their enemies, not literally. Though Carter had heard stories from the old wars that made her stomach turn, but in the way they absorbed suffering, metabolized it, and turned it into something worse. Something efficient. She knelt beside Gromnock's corpse, her gloved fingers brushing the edge of a data slate. The screen flickered, revealing another file, nutritional analysis, human sustenance requirements. A laugh bubbled in her throat, sharp and mirthless. The Vorthak had studied human biology, cataloged their caloric intake, their protein needs, their vitamin deficiencies. They had assumed, like all advanced species, that humans would break under starvation, that deprivation would soften them. They were wrong. Humans didn't just survive starvation, they weaponized it. Carter's mind flashed to the siege of Epsilon, Fae, where her unit had held the line for Fae days on half rations. To the stories from the Martian famine wars, where soldiers had fought for months on nothing but scavenged algae and the iron-rich taste of their own blood. The Vorthak had never known hunger like that. Their civilization was built on brutal efficiency, on the ruthless culling of weakness. They had never been forced to digest their own suffering, to let it ferment inside them until it became something darker, something unstoppable. A shadow fell across the room. Dixon stood in the doorway, his armor streaked with alien blood, his rifle still humming with residual heat. His face was gaunt beneath his helmet, his eyes hollow. They hadn't eaten in 3 days. Neither of them had mentioned it. "Found their storage," he said, voice rough. "You're not gonna like it." Carter followed him down the corridor, her boots crunching over shattered glass and spent energy cells. The storage chamber was a vault of gleaming silver, purple alloy, its walls lined with nutrient canisters, each one stamped with the angular glyphs of Vorthak script. And then she saw it. The human rations, stacked neatly beside the alien supplies. Untouched, the Vorthak had provided for them, even as they dissected their comrades, even as they logged every scream, every twitch of agony, because they wanted to see how long it would take for the humans to break. Carter's fingers curled into fists. Dixon exhaled, long and slow. Bastards, she didn't answer. Instead, she reached for the nearest Vorthak nutrient canister, cracked the seal, and took a long, deliberate sip. The liquid was thick, metallic, tinged with the same violet hue as their energy cores. It burned going down. Dixon watched her, his expression unreadable. Then he grabbed one for himself. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The Vorthak had thought starvation would break them. Instead, it had reminded them of what they were. Now they were hungry. The Vorthak observation chamber hummed with the low, pulsing thrum of silver-purple energy cores, their harsh light casting jagged shadows across the sterile metal walls. Gromnock's talons clicked against the data slate as he reviewed the latest physiological scans, his cranial spines twitching in agitation. The humans should have broken by now. They should have. The calculations were flawless. The simulations, exhaustive. Every known species in the galactic arm had a threshold, a point where the body's desperation overrode the mind's defiance. The Vorthak had mapped it in 1,000 subjects. The precise moment hunger carved through pride, where isolation eroded resolve. But these creatures, Gromnock's secondary eyelids flicked sideways as he studied the feed. The female Carter sat cross-legged in the containment cell, her posture deceptively relaxed. The male Dixon leaned against the wall, his fingers tapping an absent rhythm against his thigh. Neither had touched the human rations, neither had so much as glanced at them. Instead, they had consumed the Vorthak nutrient paste without hesitation. Without revulsion, Gromnock's mandibles tightened. That alone was an anomaly. The paste was formulated for Vorthak biology, thick with metallic enzymes, laced with trace radiation that would sear the digestive tracts of lesser species. The humans had no business tolerating it, let alone metabolizing it. Yet their vitals remained stable, their energy levels, inexplicably, had even risen. A chime sounded from the console. Vorgul's massive frame filled the doorway, his armored plates glinting under the violet luminescence. Gromnock hesitated. The High Commander did not tolerate failure. The subjects continued to defy projected models. He admitted, mandibles clicking in frustration. Their endurance parameters exceed all known biological limits. Vorgul's gaze flicked to the feed. The humans had begun moving, methodical, deliberate. Carter was examining the cell's seams, her fingers tracing the nearly invisible joins in the metal. Dixon had pried up a loose panel near the floor, his hands working with quiet precision. They weren't waiting for rescue, they were engineering one. Vorgul's spines flared. Increase the variables, Gromnock stiffened. High Commander, the stress thresholds are irrelevant. Vorgul's voice was a blade of dark steel. If they will not yield to deprivation, then we escalate. Activate the resonance field. Gromnock's claws trembled. The resonance field was a last resort, a weapon designed to vibrate a prisoner's skeletal structure until the bones fractured from within. No species had endured it beyond 7 cycles, but as he input the command, something in the human male's posture shifted. Dixon had gone still, his head tilting slightly, as if listening to a sound only he could hear. Then, impossibly, his lips curled. Gromnock's blood ran cold. The field engaged. The air in the cell shimmered, warping under the invisible frequencies. Carter staggered, her teeth bared in a silent snarl, but she didn't fall. Instead, she braced against the wall, her muscles locking as if she could physically resist the vibrations tearing through her body. Dixon remained upright, his stance widening, his breath coming in sharp, controlled bursts. Minutes passed. The field's intensity climbed, and still, the human stood. Gromnock's data slate clattered to the floor. This wasn't endurance. This was defiance written in flesh and bone. Vorgul's growl was low, dangerous. Run the analysis again. But Gromnak already knew. The scans would show the same impossible truth. The humans' bodies were adapting. Their cells were learning. With every assault, their tissues reinforced. Their nerves recalibrated. They weren't just surviving. They were evolving. And as Carter lifted her head, her eyes locking onto the observation lens with terrifying focus, Gromnak realized the fatal flaw in their calculations. They had assumed endurance was a limit to be reached. The humans treated it as a challenge to be overcome. Section Faye. The empathy paradox. The observation chamber hummed with the residual energy of the failed experiment. The silver-purple glow of Vorthak instrumentation casting jagged shadows across Gromnak's quills. His claws trembled against the console, the data scrolling in relentless streams of cold, logical metrics that refused to align with what his eyes had witnessed. Impossible. The humans should have collapsed. Their nervous systems should have shattered under the neural disruptor's assault. Their muscles should have liquefied from the strain. Instead, they had adapted. Colonel Carter's silhouette remained upright in the testing arena. Her breathing ragged but controlled, her gaze fixed on the observation lens with a focus that burned through the reinforced glass. Beside her, Sergeant Dixon rolled his shoulders, the motion deliberate, testing, recalibrating. Gromnak's mandibles twitched. This wasn't mere biological resilience. This was something deeper, something the Vorthak had never accounted for. Run the secondary analysis, Vorgul commanded, his voice a low, grinding growl. The High Commander's armored plating bristled along his spine, his violet ocular implants flickering with suppressed agitation. Gromnak obeyed, his claws dancing across the console, pulling up the bioscans from the experiment's final moments. The holographic display flared to life, projecting the human's vitals in harsh silver-purple glyphs. Heart rates elevated but stabilizing, neural pathways rerouting around damaged synapses, muscle fibers reinforcing under stress, as if their very cells had been trained for this. A secondary anomaly. Gromnak froze, embedded in the data, buried beneath the physiological adaptations, was something far more disturbing. Empathic synchronization. When Carter's systems had faltered, Dixon's neural activity had spiked, not in self-preservation, but in response to her distress. When Dixon's muscles seized, Carter's adrenaline surged as if she were the one under strain. They weren't just enduring separately, they were enduring together. Gromnak's spines flattened against his back. The Vorthak had long dismissed empathy as a weakness, a sentimental flaw that clouded judgment and bred dependency. Yet here, in the crucible of pain, it had become a weapon, a survival mechanism. Explain, Vorgul demanded. Gromnak hesitated. How could he articulate the horror of this revelation, that the humans' greatest vulnerability was also their greatest strength, that their ability to feel for one another didn't make them fragile, it made them unstoppable? Before he could respond, a new alert flashed across the console. The humans were moving. Carter took a step forward, her boots leaving smears of sweat and blood on the alloy floor. Dixon matched her, his posture shifting into something protective, predatory. They weren't waiting for the next test. They were challenging it. Vorgul's claws flexed, the edges scraping against the console's surface. Increase the disruptor field to maximum. Gromnak's pulse thundered in his secondary arteries. Maximum output would liquefy a Vorthak's nervous system in seconds, but the humans, they had already proven they could adapt. And now, as Carter's lips curled into something too sharp to be a smile, Gromnak realized the true depth of their miscalculation. The Vorthak had sought to break them. The humans had only grown stronger. And somewhere, buried in the wreckage of their assumptions, was the chilling truth. Empathy wasn't a weakness. It was the foundation of their defiance. Section Faye. The final report. The disruptor field hummed to life, its silver-purple energy crackling along the chamber walls like a living storm. The air itself seemed to warp, vibrating at frequencies designed to shred organic tissue, to unravel neural pathways. Vorgul watched, his armored fingers tightening around the edge of the observation console. This was the threshold, the moment where even Vorthak warriors would collapse, their nervous systems reduced to useless static. Colonel Carter stood. Her body trembled, muscles locking under the assault. But she did not fall. Beside her, Sergeant Dixon let out a raw, guttural sound. Not pain, not surrender, but something far more dangerous. Defiance. His fingers dug into his palms, blood welling between his knuckles as he forced himself forward. One step, then another. Gromnock's data feeds flickered wildly, his analytical mind scrambling to reconcile the impossible. The disruptor field was at Fey capacity, beyond theoretical safety limits, and yet the humans were adapting. Their biosigns spiked, neural activity flaring in erratic, unpredictable patterns. Not degradation, reconfiguration. A memory surfaced unbidden, decades ago. When the Vorthak had first encountered humanity, a single human life spared, a debt unasked for, a gesture dismissed as sentimentality. Now, he understood. This was not mere endurance. This was evolution under fire. Carter's head lifted, her eyes locking onto the observation panel, as if she could see straight through the reinforced alloy, straight into Vorgul's soul. Her lips moved, shaping words the audio pickups couldn't catch, but Gromnock didn't need to hear them. "Is that all you've got?" Vorgul snarled, slamming a clawed fist onto the console. "Activate secondary protocols. Full spectrum suppression." The chamber's lighting shifted, the silver-purple glow intensifying as the walls themselves pulsed with weaponized energy. This was no longer a test. This was extermination, low at first, almost inaudible beneath the disruptor's scream. Dixon's shoulders shook, his teeth bared in something between a grin and a snarl. Carter's breath came in ragged bursts, but her stance never wavered. They were breaking. Gromnock could see it in the way their capillaries ruptured beneath their skin, in the tremors racking their limbs. But they were laughing, because they knew the Vorthak had miscalculated. Empathy was not a flaw. It was the forge in which humanity's resilience had been tempered. A debt remembered was a debt repaid, and humanity had just decided how. The disruptor field flickered, a power surge. Gromnock's console erupted in warnings, the system overloading as Carter's biosigns changed. Neural pathways rerouted, synapses firing in patterns no Vorthak algorithm could predict. She wasn't resisting the field, she was hijacking it. Vorgul's roar of fury drowned beneath the klaxons as the chamber's energy signatures inverted, the disruptor's own power lashing back through the conduits. The observation panel shattered, violet sparks raining down as the humans moved, their bodies surging forward with unnatural, terrifying precision. Gromnock's final report would never be filed, but if it had been, it would have contained only 3 words. We were wrong. The chamber convulsed. Gromnock's claws skittered across the console, his neural tendrils writhing in panic as the disruptor field's energy, once a controlled silver-purple storm, twisted into something wild. The humans should have been broken. Their nervous systems should have been reduced to screaming static beneath the Vorthak's precision. Engineered agony. Instead, they were adapting. Colonel Carter's body arched, not in pain, but in transformation. The disruptor's energy coiled around her like a serpent caught in its own grip, her neural patterns rewriting themselves in real time. Synapses burning pathways the Vorthak had never conceived possible. The field wasn't suppressing her. It was fueling her. Gromnock's data streams dissolved into chaos. His tertiary eyes flickered, struggling to process the biological impossibility unfolding before him. Human resilience had always been a variable in his models. But this was something else. This was vengeance. Across the chamber, Sergeant Dixon moved. His muscles, moments ago locked in seizure, now surged with predatory grace. The disruptor field's backlash had fused the restraints into slag, and he tore free with a sound like rending steel. His eyes, when they locked onto Vorgul, were no longer human. They burned with the same silver-purple fire that had once been the Vorthak's weapon. Now, it was theirs. Vorgul's armored carapace flared in instinctive threat display, his combat augments priming with a chorus of hydraulic hisses. But for the first time in his long, merciless career, the High Commander hesitated. The humans were supposed to be prey. They were not. Carter's voice cut through the klaxons, not a scream, but a command. Dixon. Link. The sergeant didn't hesitate. His neural lace, a prototype the Vorthak hadn't even known existed, flared to life. Tendrils of electric energy lashing out to intertwine with Carter's own. The disruptor field's energy, now fully inverted, pulsed, and the chamber's walls groaned, as the very air turned to a conductor of human will. Gromnock's last functioning monitor shattered. The feedback was catastrophic. Every system in the facility, bleeding raw power as the humans rewrote the field's parameters. The Vorthak's greatest weapon had become a noose around their own throats. Vorgul roared, his plasma caster rising, but Dixon was faster. The sergeant crossed the distance in a blur, his augmented fist driving into Vorgul's thoracic plating with a sound like a starship's hull breaching. The High Commander staggered, his systems screeching in protest as the impact rippled through his reinforced skeleton. Dixon didn't let up. His next strike targeted the neural relays along Vorgul's spine, precise, brutal, learned. The humans had been studying them. Gromnock's tendrils spasmed as the realization struck. The Vorthak had dissected human weakness, but humanity had reciprocated. Every moment of captivity, every scan, every test, they had been recording, adapting, and now they were winning. Carter's hand closed around a fallen disruptor node. The tech was alien, but her grip was sure. The node flared in her grasp, its energy bending to her will as she channeled it into a single, devastating pulse. The chamber's remaining observation panels exploded inward, a hail of jagged shards that tore through the last of the Vorthak's defenses. Gromnock's body hit the floor, his systems failing one by one. His final sight was Carter standing amidst the wreckage, her silhouette haloed in the same silver-purple fire that had once been the Vorthak's dominion. Now, it was her weapon. The debt had been repaid, and the galaxy would remember.